listening to yet another episode of Smash the Bug. I'm your host, Joseph Maxwell, and I am excited to bring to you a guest of call it a category that we don't have on here very often. You see, when I'm going out and looking at people to bring onto the podcast, it's people that have like great solutions and fix some incredible stuff and that sort of thing. But I've come to see I've left out a very, very important category of people to come on here. And that is people in the junior developer space. Now we think junior developer, what do they have to offer, right? They're just starting up. No, not at all. That is absolutely not the case. Junior developers, in my opinion, are some of the most amazing people to talk to. Why? Because they're hungry. They want to learn. They want to grow. And unfortunately, and I hate to say this, there are many senior developers who have capped out and they don't know where to go, where to turn. And so they just stop learning and kind of stagnate, which is not the case for junior developers. They're hungry. And that's why I love to talk with junior developers. And I realized, wait, we need to get someone on this show, and you'll hear from more people here in the future, as well as I've realized this has been a missing category of junior developers who have done some amazing fixes, who fought through some amazing battles, and they are hungry to learn, hungry to grow. So you are going to hear from one such amazing person today, Alice Dean. We've had some interactions over the past past year or so, I think, via our Slack channel. And then I was able to meet her in person at Meet Magento UK here a couple of weeks ago. Very wonderful, nice person. She's from Shrewsbury, England, which I learned here as we just were talking about this a minute or two ago. It's a town, not in American terms, a city. So it's a town. She's a junior developer at Fisheye, which was recently acquired by UE, and she has already achieved her certification. So again, junior developers, a great way to prove your capabilities, your understanding of the platform is with a certification. So without further ado, I want to welcome Alice. Welcome, Alice. It's great having you here on this podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's just kick it off and ask you my first question. So what does your working day look like? What are your responsibilities?
So I've been doing development full-time since about March, around my birthday. So that was a nice treat, moving from technical account manager to being a developer. And at Fisheye, we mainly sort of aim to do rescues and recoveries. So a lot of sites that come to us aren't always to like the Magento coding standards or our Fisheye coding standards as well. So that can be like modules not being installed via Composer, like just as an example. So a lot of the day-to-day is bug fixing and upgrades, and then some sort of like enhancements after we make sure like when the client's onboarded, after we've done all of those tasks, we have a whole check sheet of things that we go through, such as making indexes to run, making sure crons are running, making sure that our correct configuration would be in the admin. After those are all done, we sort of look at doing either upgrades to make sure the site's on the latest version, and then doing feature enhancements. So day to day, I'm either fixing bugs or I'm building new features, which is a bit more fun.
Of course.
And then just making sure that there's a lot of cases where, because I was a technical account manager previously, I'm sort of still talking to clients, making sure that we get things over the line, making sure that I get their requirements from them personally. So Becky at Outdoor Toys, we have each other's mobile numbers, and I'm talking to her. It's like, so you know that Shipper HQ thing? She's like, yeah. And then we'll go off on a tangent and talk about stuff we've watched on Netflix. So yeah, making sure I'm talking to customers, getting things over the line, getting their requirements absolutely correct, and then talking to vendors, making sure that their modules work. So that can be a bit of a pickle sometimes, but I'm seeing that cropping up a lot in my sort of day-to-day working.
Really? So I guess let's break this down. You started back in March, switching from a technical account manager to a developer. Can you because I know titles vary across from company to company. Can you give me like 30-second rundown of what did you do as a technical account manager?
Spreadsheets.
Okay.
No, booking in tasks, managing a couple of developers, making sure items getting over the line, gathering requirements from customers. I'd helped with the QA, the UAT. But because I was technical as well, I mean, I went to university and studied web development. I would sometimes, if things weren't progressing as fast as I'd like to, I'd just go after work and go, well, I'll do this myself then. And so I think having the sort of technical aspect helped with customers' sort of reassurance of, oh, they do actually know what they're talking about. But it was mainly just making sure stuff gets done.
Right. So what level of experience did you have prior to your March birthday switch over to being a developer? Like, you had technical, so you were technical. So like you studied web development. So, and you were obviously at least somewhat familiar with Magento or Adobe Commerce. Like, is there a way that you can quantify your level of comfort in the code before you made that jump over?
I say about 50-50 on how comfortable I was. I obviously can understand basics of many different languages. It's sort of jack of all trades, but like master of none almost. I could get the basics, but I didn't actually know sort of core Magento 2 coding standards. I worked with Magento 1 when I was first came to Fisheye, and that was 5 years ago now. And I hadn't actually properly built like just a module by itself. I know that we had all like the different pools of areas in Magento 1, and I actually didn't understand the whole structure within Magento 2. So basic principles were there, but actually putting it in terms of the Magento framework, I didn't really have that skill. So it was great to be able to get stuck in. And as soon as I knew that I was going to be able to be a developer again, go, yes, I'm going to get that exam. I'm going to prove to you that I do want to be a great developer and that you are correct and right to put me back in this place.
Good for you. Good for you. So one other quick question here before we go into talking about some of the challenges you fought through is what was the process like to get your certification? Like, and more from like how difficult was that for you, and also when did you do that? Because obviously I'm guessing you started studying for it in March or shortly thereafter. And how long did it take for you to from the start of study to when you actually were able to achieve it?
I always get quite nervous in exams, so I actually started the actual studying the exam over Christmas because I knew I had like a lot of time off. But it was actually with the previous exam, so they got changed in like January the 10th, and I had mine booked for January the 10th, and then I logged in, really anxious, went to take it, and they lost my exam booking, and I was like, great. So had a little 30-minute breather, spoke to Mr. Magento, John Hughesy, and I was like, John, they've lost it. He's like, no worries. I had like a couple weeks break, and I was like, I can't keep putting it off. I'm just going to need to do the new exam. So I got the new SwiftOtter study guide, and I sort of like looked at it for a bit, and then I was like, I kept putting it off again. And then our managing director came in. He goes, you got to finish it in April. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, April, I want you to pass. So I booked it in, and 8 weeks later, I put myself like loads of like little dates in my calendar. This is what I'm going to do then. And I think it was like 6 to 8 weeks. I think 6 weeks for each section, and then 2 weeks for making sure at the end that I can go over anything again. And I just every single night study, only a couple of hours after work, but just making sure that I was competent in all areas. It was going through the study guide, writing notes, and then I do programming at the same time. And then I had my little cheat sheet and just went on holiday and looked at that.
Nice. Was it was it tough or was it easy for you?
Actually, the practice exams that you guys did was a lot more tougher than the actual exam.
Good.
So you do it and you're like, God, this is hard. I'm like, I don't know, I'm not going to remember this class name. What the hell? And then you get into the exam. And it's like, I didn't really need to know that. Like, I know it now, great, but it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I think I only got 42 out of 60 anyway, but I was like, I'm just pleased I've passed it, and like the hard work's paid off.
Good for you. That's absolutely, that's the way to do it. And I was just curious your experience in that. So that's good. Thank you for Thank you for sharing, because I know that'll be an encouragement to others as well. Let's move into a challenge that you've had to fight through. It looks like you have one written up here in the notes, and I'd love to let's talk through it. Like, so what was one of those things you've had to fight through here?
So the first one that I've got written down was actually something that I only finished last week. So
Good. Fresh.
Yes, and still it hurts because I fixed one bit, and now I've uncovered another bug, which is Ace. So I'm going to have a look at that later. So Magento 243P1 is one of the sites we have. The invoices weren't sending, so you'd put through an order confirmation email would get sent, but the invoice email wouldn't get sent.
Okay.
So annoying, because what I normally do, I go, let's find another site where it's working on the same version of Magento. Is it working? Yes, it was working. I was like, why? That's weird. So I checked the configuration in the admin, looked all correct. And then just trying to find the pinpoint exactly of where the invoices are meant to be sending from. So I managed to find that, and then just working through enabled Xdebug and trying to find exactly what might be going wrong. I also had a look at the Magento GitHub, because more often than not, if you've got a bug that's on your site, and I know it wasn't happening on another, but someone else has probably got the issue as well. And there was actually some previous pull requests to do with invoices not sending because they didn't respect the admin configuration. They just send invoices all of the time, or they didn't send at all. But having a look at my issue, it should have been happening on the other site, but it didn't, and it was annoying me. So it took a lot longer than I wanted it to, really, but I was happy I got it in the end. So there's a send invoice email observer, and it goes off to get the invoice collection. And when it gets the collection in the function, it checks to see if invoices is null. So if it's not null, obviously it's going to try and get the invoices, and it will instantiate it with a collection of invoices, or just the invoice class. However, it was always returning false when it was going to the observer. And I was like, no, I know that there's an invoice there. I can see you. Why are you returning false? So as I said, it took me longer than I wanted it to. But I finally found that because the get invoice collection was being called more than once, on the first time that it would come in and it would try and get the invoices, it would set the invoices but to like an empty collection, and then it will come back round eight times after and go, no, still no invoices, still none. So I had to re-change the check to say, well, no, if it's null, or if there's any if the count is more than one, because we want to recheck to see if there's invoices. It's not going to be null each time. You've just cached this result, and now you're not going to go check it again. So it was a bit of a pickle, because I'd originally thought it was because it wasn't loading the invoices, but that was incorrect. I came back to it. I actually had to have a bit of a break with it, because it was infuriating me. I looked at it on a Sunday night, and I was like, why aren't you working? Because I had it working at one point, and then I did the composer patch for it, and I looked at it again. I was like, you're not working now. So a day or two later, I realized what I'd done, put in a patch for it, and it was working again. I was like, brilliant. So change the check. Now it gets the invoice, doesn't just check, it'll check if it's null, but then it'll check, oh, have you actually got invoices now? And then did all that, and I was like, oh, brilliant. Now let's we use a module called the Fuman email attachments, which attaches it as a PDF as well. I was like, they'll probably want that because they're a trade site. So I enabled that and got that sending as part of the email, and then it realized that on the bottom it goes where the items are meant to be on the PDF. It says no items. I was like, cool. So I fixed one thing, and that's a treat for later that I'll have to fix. I haven't figured that one out yet.
I really appreciate how you solved this problem. I think this was this shows more experience than you let on to. So, the fact that you tested this against the vanilla Magento to test that this is not like broken everywhere. You obviously looked at the error logs. You're using Xdebug. And I think I feel like I'm missing one of the other steps that you took. Like this is really excellent troubleshooting, excellent debugging, and so kudos to you for that. In how you approached it. And that was the other thing is you took some time off, and I obviously it's a little different if this was like a critical production blockage issue. Like this wasn't. So you took some time off, came back, and you got it. So great work on that.
Thanks. We're taught well here at Fisheye, and we have a great team of everybody who's here to support each other.
Sounds like it. That is fantastic. So, what was the final? I guess how was the final fix applied? I think you said a patch. So was that like a composer patch that you used?
Yeah, I used a composer patch in the end. It was only a one-line fix for all of that trouble, but glad I got it. So maybe
That's
looked
typical.
a bit on the Magento GitHub at some stage. I'm going to be checking with internally with other people first to see what they think is a good fix before I go ahead with that.
So, and I don't think you officially said, but what was the one-line fix? I'm curious.
I have the exact code. So it was the Magento sales order, model order. I think it was line 1911. So it's in the if statement, it goes, this invoice is equals null. So it's checking if it's null. And then I put a check for also checking if the count is more than one. So if there's now there's more, if there wasn't any invoices before, go and recheck to see if there's invoices now.
Excellent. Okay. Excellent. Very good. Good troubleshooting on that. Those can be very frustrating. The one thing that I just as a little suggestion for the future that has actually been really helpful for me, and I don't know if it would specifically work, but it can be something helpful to try in this type of a scenario because troubleshooting bugs or issues like this can be, for me at least, are very frustrating because it seems like 75% of my time is spent setting up test cases. I get to the time like you're talking about here, and I miss it. Sometimes I accidentally step over the line and I shouldn't have done that. And it's like, okay, well, that was unfortunate because now I have to go through another 3-minute setup process. Something that I've been experimenting with, and in some cases it works, and there's a couple cases it hasn't, is using integration tests for that very that same activity. So basically, it's an automated process of getting there and using fixtures. It can be possible to set that up. That said, it's in other cases it can be really difficult to set up a environment case, and this might be one of the more difficult cases to do that. Basically pushing an order through with an invoice, etc. So an accurate replication of that with integration tests, but that's something that we've kind of messed with internally here on our side. Is like, can we use an integration test? Because the integration tests aren't the fastest in the world sometimes, but even sitting for 15-20 seconds to let that spin up could save a lot of time as opposed to like working through creating an order and invoicing it out and all that stuff. Probably 2 to 3 minutes plus or minus.
It was a lot of time, but that's something I could look at in the future.
It might save some time, but it's also not necessarily easy itself. So it's it's 6 of one, half a dozen another, and something that we might find helpful in that way. So very good, very, very, very good troubleshooting there. Great work on that. Let's talk about another challenge.
This one was from a couple of weeks ago. Actually, I think probably last month now. So I've got bringing up my notes just to familiarize myself with it. So within Fisheye, we have a product alert module. So
Mm-hmm.
on Magento, you can only send product alerts for in stock and price changes if the customer is logged in. So we've built our own module to allow guests to be able to do that as well. The module is was compatible with, I think it was like 2.3 versions of Magento. And on the latest release of Magento 2.4.4, the product alert module changed. So it wasn't using, I don't think it was an observer previously, and now it's using the message queue framework, or like the RabbitMQ, which is something I've never like even touched before.
Yep.
I've used it maybe once and it was painful. So coming back to that, I knew it wasn't going to be an easy task. So luckily, with our module, they're very well built. So I knew exactly where the issue was coming from. And this was an issue that was handed over from me from one of our more senior developers who really helped me with this task. So he said, this file, you're going to need to replace it entirely. I was like, brilliant. Okay, cool. So a lot of the time was, again, spent trying to set up the test cases with making sure that I've got the correct. There was first one initial issue was making sure that the previous file, which had been used as a preference, which was, I know it's not great to use preferences, but we had to do it to make sure that the code worked correctly and as expected. Remove that, do a preference on a new file, and then start working from there to see what actually was going wrong. Because it's a custom module that we've built ourselves, it's not like I could go check anywhere else to see if it was broken anywhere else. I just knew it was going to be broken. And working with the messaging system was not fun at all, because it's something that I couldn't use Xdebug on. I was having real difficulties trying to get it set up correctly, because it would sort of step through it almost to sort of some part, but it was only the outer functions, not the actual main function that I needed to change. So I'm just bringing up, no, that link's not working. So I knew that it was going to be a preference on the alert processor, but I couldn't use Xdebug to get into there. So I worked with another developer here at Fisheye, Nathan Day. He was an absolute godsend and so helpful. So he gave me two commands that I could use to try and run the consumer's queue, which is something in the dev docs which I'd found, but I also needed to pair it with running the cron as well. So I'd start the queue and then run the cron. And this is just going blindly in, not having any experiences with the messaging queue, just going, right, okay, I'm within the time frame that I have. At the moment, I don't have the time to go in and have like a proper dig around and find out how it's working. Let's just try and get this done. So I managed to get these commands running to try and trigger the alert to send. However, it was not really coming out with any error logs. So sometimes it would try and trigger, there was no error log, sometimes there were error logs. So I'd sit there and I'd follow the tail logs with the tail command. So I was trying to watch it come through, and 50% of the time it did. This is why it took about 20 hours on this task, unfortunately. But it was just triggering it again and again, trying to see what's happening. And in the end, I started to get a little bit closer with the more errors coming up, and I could see what was going on. So with our module, we basically create a fake user and pass it in information. I think it was the email address, last name, and website ID. And then we, instead of just going to get the user, we put it into this function where it checks, is this user existing? Go get it. If it's not, let's create this fake new user. And because the error logs weren't providing anything helpful, I sort of put in the code which I thought would work and go, okay, let's try this. And eventually I did get closer, and the only thing that I was missing was the fact that I needed to set the group ID on the customer. So once I got that, I managed to run it successfully and it went through. So it was kind of throwing stuff at a wall, seeing what would stick, but persevering through it. And unfortunately, there was
Good for
actually
you.
no way of saying simply just do X, Y, and Z to accomplish this. It was just persevering. And although I didn't have that background knowledge, which is something that I'm definitely going to learn in the future, making sure that sort of thinking about it logically and go, okay,
Hmm.
what do I think would need to work? And then doing that,
Yes.
that somehow worked in the end. And we've now got an up-to-date module 244, which is nice.
Good for you. Good for you. I'm curious. Back on. So, do you know why you weren't able to get Xdebug on the Q consumer process?
That's something that I've not actually worked out. And it's an issue that I've had before when I briefly looked at the queue for one of the exports,
Hmm.
because the export in one of the versions of Magento got rid of a certain field and I couldn't get Xdebug working during the queue consumer. So something to investigate in the future, but at this stage, it's not something I know.
One thing just to quickly throw out there. I know this is not like a debug or troubleshooting session, but there is a, depending on what development environment you're using, there is a PHP INI file for the CLI, and technically this is PHP on the CLI that you're running there. And in some cases, it's explicitly Xdebug is explicitly disabled on the CLI, and once you get that turned back on, it can literally solve the problem right then and there. So, because you should be able to debug to use Xdebug on your uh, on CLI commands, which the Q consumer is nothing more than that. It's just a CLI command that listens to the RabbitMQ um, messages that are coming through, and it's literally nothing more than that. So I think getting to be able to troubleshoot that is actually should be fairly straightforward. It's just a matter of reviewing your local PHP configuration. But this is really good, Alice. And this and that's another thing I appreciate about so many junior developers, and you are no exception, is that tenacity and that perseverance. That's what pushes you up the ranks as you're learning. You tackle more difficult challenges, um, and this was excellent. Like very good work on this. If I was your manager, I'd be very proud of you.
Thanks.
Because be able to fight through some of this stuff, even blindly coding it. I mean, like, it's unfortunate that you have to do that, but it's stuff like that happens. Like, and it's, it's part of the job, and we can't just say, oh, I can't see what I'm doing, thus I can't do it. It's like, no, you still did it, and that's really impressive. So, kudos to you in that, to all the other junior developers out there. That tenacity, that perseverance goes way farther than any lack of technical skills as you are still coming up to speed. And that's what makes, I think, the gap, because as you put in that work, you invest there. That's how you level up your skills. So your skills, I'm sure, dramatically increased through that process. But then also, you got the problem solved in the end. So it didn't really matter that you didn't have RabbitMQ knowledge going into this in the first place. That didn't really matter, because came out of it in the end with success. So you had to fight probably through it longer than maybe somebody a couple years your senior would have had to, but you still came out in the end victorious and a winner, and you learned that knowledge for yourself. So yeah, absolutely well done. Very well done on that.
Thanks. I think it's always nice having that sense of achievement. It's like when something's been so
Absolutely.
difficult and you're like, yeah, look at me, I can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, despite the challenges and the frustrations of this learning curve, it's those wins that go, I think, way further. Absolutely. That's very good. All right. So as we work to wrap this up, what would you recommend to others who have your same job title or are learning or whatever? Like, I mean, honestly, I think everyone should approach life as a junior developer, should approach their career as a junior developer, hungry, tenacity, having tenacity, perseverance. It goes a very long ways. What would you recommend to other people in your place?
I think reaching out to other people and having a look on like the Magento GitHub, because it's more often than not that if you know the error is coming from Magento, someone's probably reported that already. Save yourself a bit of time, go have a look and just review that. One which is really important to me, and I'm so lucky to work with like a bunch of great developers here at Fisheye, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's so important because people were at the same stage as you a couple years ago or not that long ago, and they know what it feels like to be in your position, and I'm sure that they'll be eager to help. I know that the people here are, and don't just ask for the help and go, okay, you've given me some code, great. Either ask for pointers and say, how do you think I could fix this? So then you have at least a direction to go in, or ask a person how they got to their solution. Don't just get the code. Try and like understand what has happened a bit more. Otherwise, you don't learn that way. And you'll never be expected to know absolutely everything. You're always, like some of our like seniors, sometimes they ask for help with questions and stuff as well. It's just sharing that knowledge, and definitely keep pushing yourself. You're going to be great one day. I hope to be, and it's just persevering and just putting in that effort. You'll definitely get out of it what you put in.
Excellent. That is really good, Alice. Very good advice. Yeah. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story, your experience, and I wish you the best as your career continues to bloom and develop. And you are a very very valuable person to have on staff. So thank you for sharing your experience and all of that. So yeah. I think we're done there. So very good. Anyways, thank you, and wish you the best as you continue forward.
Thanks.
It was an absolute pleasure having Alice here on this podcast. As you can hear, she has every quality of being an excellent developer. And honestly, since she's like officially been doing this stuff since March, I'm doing my math right, that's 4 months. It's pretty incredible what she's tackled in this time. So, and a lot of that is because of her passion about her work, the tenacity of getting stuff done, her perseverance, and as well as just really good quality debugging skills. If you didn't catch those, go back and listen to what she was talking about doing. There are senior developers who don't even have the discipline to take some of those steps. So listen to this, learn from it, approach life with the curiosity of a junior developer, and you will benefit. Your career will benefit as a result. So thank you for listening to Smash the Bug. It was a pleasure spending this time with you. Hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll look forward to next time with more great content.